Моя работа сгорела, но ничего страшного, я могу устроиться на Озон.
A Russian company just did something unusual. It painted a message on the roof of its own warehouse in letters big enough to be seen from the sky. The message read, "This is not Wildberries, please fly away." The company is called Ozon. It is one of the two biggest online shopping companies in Russia, similar to how Amazon works in the United States. This message was painted on the roof of Ozon's main warehouse in the city of Nizhny Novgorod. The company was hoping to send a clear signal to Ukrainian military drones flying overhead. A major Russian company, backed by billions in revenue, genuinely believed its best defense against a Ukrainian strike drone wasn't better security or even a real air defense system. It was paint, and a hope that a machine flying toward Russian territory might actually read the name on a rooftop and choose to fly somewhere else instead. Here is why. For the past 2 weeks, Ukraine's military had been striking warehouses belonging to Ozon's biggest competitor, a company called Wildberries. Ozon wanted to make sure that if a drone flew over its own building, whoever was controlling it would understand this was a different company and leave it alone. That plan did not work. Just 2 days after the message appeared, Ukrainian drones struck a location where an Ozon building and a Wildberries building sit right next to each other. A few days after that, Ukraine struck again, hitting a large, newly built Wildberries warehouse. As of the most recent count, Ukraine has now struck at least 17 different Wildberries warehouses across Russia, with 11 of them destroyed or badly damaged. This is no longer a story about a handful of warehouse fires. It has grown into something with real consequences for Russia's economy and for one of its largest state-run banks. On the morning of July 31st, Ukrainian drones struck a warehouse area in a city called Zelenodolsk, located in Russia's Tatarstan region. Footage from local residents showed smoke rising near the Ozon facility, along with a drone exploding near the complex itself. Separate unverified video reportedly showed workers hurrying out of the facility, watching a drone crash to the ground nearby with a loud explosion. Ozon later said its workers were evacuated for only a few minutes, and that the building itself was not damaged. The company said work resumed shortly after. The local mayor, Mikhail Afanasyev, confirmed that Russian air defenses had responded to the attack that day, though he did not say exactly which building had been the actual target. Either way, this was the first time Ukraine had struck anywhere near an Ozon facility since this campaign against Wildberries began. 2 nights later, on August 2nd, Ukraine struck again, this time hitting a facility that represented something far more valuable than an ordinary storage building. The target was Novosemikino, a massive Wildberries logistics hub sitting in Samara Oblast, roughly 800 kilometers from Ukraine's most forward military positions. This wasn't some aging Soviet-era warehouse either. According to reporting on the facility, it had only been completed in March 2025, built at a cost estimated around 13 billion rubles, close to 140 million US dollars. It covered an area larger than 25 football fields and was equipped with fully automated sorting systems capable of storing well over 100 million individual items. The governor of that region, Vyacheslav Fedorishev, confirmed the strike happened and said firefighters were working to put out a large fire. Wildberries also confirmed the attack and said no one was hurt. Interestingly, right next to the warehouse stood a large display bearing the Z symbol, the same marking Russian forces have used throughout the invasion to represent their military campaign. When the fire spread through the facility that night, it burned right alongside that symbol, a detail that did not go unnoticed among people tracking the strikes online. And the commander of Ukraine's drone forces, Bravdi, made sure everyone understood this wasn't a one-off strike either. He publicly labeled it, in his own words, the 10th successful hook, an anniversary strike, openly numbering these attacks like a running scoreboard broadcast directly to Russia's own business and political leadership. He also explained why this particular warehouse mattered so much, describing it as the main connection point, moving goods between the western part of Russia and Siberia, the vast eastern region of the country. That detail is important because it shows Ukraine is not simply picking targets at random. It is deliberately choosing the warehouses that hold this entire delivery system together. Before we go further, if you're the kind of viewer who actually wants to understand what's happening in this war instead of just watching headlines fly by, this channel is for you. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss the next breakdown. This campaign has grown large enough that people outside the war are now keeping track of it too. There is now an entire page on Wikipedia listing every single warehouse strike by date and location. Some observers online have even started treating it like a checklist, marking off each warehouse as it gets hit. A campaign this careful, this well-planned, and now large enough for outsiders to track warehouse by warehouse is clearly about more than just online shopping. To understand why Ukraine is using real military resources to target Russian retail warehouses, you need to understand what these companies actually do and what Ukraine says is really being stored inside them. We'll reveal it, but first we need to understand how much power they actually hold over daily life in Russia. Wildberries and Ozon together control most of Russia's entire online shopping market. Wildberries alone holds 45% of the market, and Ozon holds another 32%. Combined, that's 77% of every online purchase made in Russia. This did not happen by accident. After Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, many well-known Western companies pulled out of the country entirely. Stores like IKEA, H&M, and Adidas closed their doors. Millions of Russian shoppers who used to buy from those companies suddenly had nowhere else to go. Wildberries and Ozon stepped into that gap and grew enormously as a result. According to reporting from Forbes, these two companies now make up about 8.5% of Russia's entire economy, and together they employ more than 5% of the country's workforce. In other words, these are not small businesses. They are two of the most important companies in Russia today. But Ozon's importance goes far beyond backup shopping. Since 2022, Russia has allowed something called parallel imports, meaning a retailer is legally permitted to bring in products without the trademark owner's permission. Ozon became the country's main channel for pulling this off. Electronics brands that had publicly cut ties with Russia, like Apple, Samsung, and Lenovo, along with vehicle parts from Volkswagen and BMW, still make their way onto Ozon's shelves. They travel through intermediaries based in Turkey, Kazakhstan, and the UAE before landing back inside Russia, technically legal on paper, but built entirely around getting around sanctions in practice. Ozon itself confirmed this openly back in 2022, telling Reuters it had begun selling popular electronics brands, including smartphones and their components, through exactly this kind of arrangement. So, when Ukraine expanded its strikes to include Ozon, it wasn't simply hitting a second online store to make a point. It was targeting the mechanism that keeps sanctioned Western technology flowing into Russia at all. But Ukraine says these warehouses are not just storing everyday household items. According to Ukrainian defense analysts, before the strikes began, Wildberries ran a special search page called War Section on its website. That page was labeled with Russia's official term for its war effort, and it listed more than 200,000 products. Analysts who reviewed those listings found items like drone parts, fiber optic cable used to guide attack drones, body armor, combat helmets, and even electronic jamming equipment. After the first strikes hit, Wildberries quietly removed that search page, but the same military-related products did not actually disappear from the website. They simply reappeared listed under ordinary, unrelated categories. Bulletproof vests were now filed under sports. Drone equipment was filed under TV and photo equipment. This wasn't some hidden secret either. Research from Foreign Policy found that military fundraising channels on Telegram had linked directly to these exact product pages over 18,000 times across just 30 channels in the past 2 years. Soldiers and volunteer groups were openly sharing Wildberries and Ozon links to help fund battlefield gear, treating the platforms as an unofficial military supply store the entire time. That single move tells you something important. If these products had nothing to do with the war, there would have been no reason to quietly hide them the moment Ukrainian strikes began. So, Ukraine's stated reason for targeting these warehouses starts to make sense. But military supplies alone don't explain everything happening here. Because underneath these burning buildings, there's a second story unfolding, one involving a major Russian bank that made a very risky bet at exactly the wrong time. Just weeks before the first warehouse ever caught fire, one of Russia's largest banks made a decision that now looks like extremely bad timing. In June of 2026, VTB, Russia's second largest state-owned bank, purchased a 5% stake in Wildberries' own banking division, known as WB Bank. VTB also secured the option to buy an even bigger share later. The bank's goal was simple. Wildberries has somewhere between 50 and 60 million customers. VTB wanted access to all of them. Then, just weeks later, the warehouses started burning. On July 27th, a Ukrainian arms manufacturer named Denis Shtillerman, who leads a company called Firepoint, gave an interview to journalist Dmitry Gordon. In that interview, Shtillerman stated plainly that Wildberries is the largest single borrower in all of Russia. He said that if Wildberries collapses, the loans tied to it, worth what he described as trillions of rubles, could be lost entirely. And he specifically named VTB as the bank most exposed to that risk. Shtillerman's exact words were direct. He said VTB was already in a difficult position, and that this situation could put Russia's second largest bank at serious risk. He then added plainly that the campaign against Wildberries and Ozon must continue. It's important to note that this is one man's assessment, not an official financial report. VTB itself has not confirmed the exact size of its financial exposure, but the market reacted anyway. According to reporting from Global Banking and Finance, VTB's own stock price dropped 2.5% on the very day that the interview became public. VTB's first deputy chief executive, Dmitry Payanov, responded publicly not long after. He confirmed that questions had already been raised internally about whether VTB might need to step in and financially support Wildberries. He said the bank would be open to various forms of lending support if such a request came in. Think about what that actually means. A bank that had just months earlier bought into Wildberries, expecting steady growth and millions of new customers, is now openly discussing whether it might need to bail that same company out. This detail matters far beyond one company's warehouse fires. It shows that this campaign is not simply damaging buildings and delaying package deliveries. It's now reaching directly into the financial system that supports Russia's broader economy, at a moment the country can least afford new instability. And this is where the story only continues to widen, because a bank quietly worried about its exposure is just the beginning. The financial pressure on Wildberries and Ozon has already started showing up in something ordinary Russian shoppers can see for themselves: higher prices. According to reporting from the New Voice of Ukraine, prices on both Wildberries and Ozon have risen somewhere between 10 and 35% across many product categories. Interestingly, the actual listed prices from sellers have not changed much. What changed is that both companies stopped offering the discounts and promotions they used to pay for out of their own pockets. For some sellers, particularly those selling clothing and shoes, the situation has become even harder. The fees these platforms now charge sellers have climbed above 60% of each sale in some categories. That means for every 100 rubles a product sells for, the seller only keeps about 40. Some sellers have already stopped selling through these platforms entirely. Facing this pressure, Wildberries began quietly searching for a way out of Russia altogether. According to Kommersant, the company started looking for 100,000 square meters of warehouse space in neighboring Kazakhstan, hoping to move part of its operations somewhere Ukrainian drones could not reach. That plan ran into an immediate problem. According to a Kazakhstan-based real estate expert named Stanislav Akhmedjanov, the entire country of Kazakhstan only has about 130,000 square meters of warehouse space available in total, and it's scattered across many different cities. There simply isn't one single location large enough to meet what Wildberries was asking for. Kazakhstan's own government responded publicly as well. Its Ministry of Trade and Integration said it had not received any official request from Wildberries and that any future proposal would be reviewed with what it called Kazakhstan's own national interests in mind. In plain terms, Kazakhstan is not rushing to help. Meanwhile, back inside Russia, property owners have grown reluctant to rent warehouse space to Wildberries at all. Standard business insurance policies do not cover damage from drone strikes, which means any building leased to the company instantly becomes an uninsurable risk for its owner. There's one more detail here worth knowing, because it raises a real question about timing. According to Medusa's reporting, on July 7th, 11 days before the very first warehouse was struck, Wildberries quietly updated its contract with sellers. The new terms removed the company's financial responsibility for any goods destroyed in a drone attack. In other words, before a single warehouse had burned, Wildberries had already changed its paperwork to protect itself, while leaving its own sellers without any way to recover their losses. So look at where this leaves the company. Prices climbing, sellers leaving, no safe country willing to offer enough warehouse space, and a contract clause written before the crisis even began, one that leaves hundreds of thousands of small business owners with no legal path to be repaid for what they've already lost. Add up everything from just the first night of this campaign, and the scale becomes clear. According to data insight analyst Sergey Semko, cited by Forbes Russia, the strikes on 2 warehouses alone in the cities of Elektrostal and Kotovsk caused an estimated 280 billion rubles in damage. That works out to roughly 2.3 billion US dollars. To put that number in perspective, Semko noted it's larger than the entire annual government budget of 53 separate Russian regions, including Omsk, Belgorod, and Udmurtia. And that figure only covers the very first night of strikes. Many more have followed since. There's a deeper problem hiding underneath all of this, one that has nothing to do with any single warehouse. Wildberries alone operates more than 200 logistics facilities scattered across Russia, covering a combined area of over 5 million square meters. Every single one of them is a potential target. To actually defend that many buildings, Russia would need to permanently station serious air defense systems, something like the Pantsir S-1, at dozens of civilian warehouses, hundreds of kilometers from the front line. Each Pantsir system costs somewhere around $14 to $15 million, and the missiles it fires run somewhere between $40,000 and $100,000 apiece. Ukraine's drones cost roughly $55,000 each, so Russia is stuck with a losing trade every single time. Either fire an expensive missile to bring down a cheap drone over a shopping warehouse, or let the warehouse burn. And if Russia pulls air defense back to guard its retail centers, that's equipment no longer sitting on the actual front line. There is no version of this where Russia comes out ahead. There's also a striking parallel behind Ukraine's reasoning for these strikes. For years, Russia has targeted Ukraine's own postal delivery companies, Nova Poshta and Ukrposhta, claiming their sorting centers were being used to store military supplies alongside ordinary packages. That is nearly the exact same justification Ukraine is now using against Wildberries. Wildberries' own founder, Tatiana Kim, has publicly called Ukraine's strikes an act of international terrorism, using almost identical language to what Russian officials have used for years to describe attacks on Ukraine's postal network. Russia's government response so far has been fairly quiet in public. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov publicly praised Wildberries for its efforts to help affected sellers, a response some analysts noted seemed more like quiet concern than genuine confidence. Behind the scenes, the government has confirmed that discussions are underway about possible financial support for the company, with VTB expected to play a central role, though no final decision has been announced. Some of the damage from this campaign appears likely to last well beyond the immediate warehouse fires. Property owners across Russia are becoming increasingly unwilling to sign new leases with Wildberries at all. Insurance companies are declining to write new policies for large warehouses, since drone strikes simply aren't something standard coverage was ever built to handle. Many sellers are already looking for other ways to sell their products, moving away from the large centralized warehouse model that made these platforms so convenient and affordable in the first place. And there is no indication this campaign is finished. Ukraine's drone forces commander has continued publicly, numbering each new strike, treating this as an ongoing, tracked operation rather than a short burst of attacks. Firepoint's Denis Stillerman put it even more directly in his own interview, stating plainly that Ukraine intends to, in his words, finish off both Wildberries and Ozon completely. So here is where this story currently stands. A company painted a message on its own roof, hoping a drone would simply read it and move along. That message did not stop a single strike. 17 warehouses have now been hit. A national bank has publicly acknowledged its own exposure. Prices have climbed for millions of ordinary shoppers, and the company at the center of it all quietly rewrote its own contracts before the first fire ever started, leaving its own sellers to absorb the loss alone. But warehouses burning on Russian soil are only half of what this war is now reaching into. Because while Moscow's own retail giants scrambled to survive drone strikes at home, the war has already crossed a line that should worry every country watching from the outside. A Russian missile did not stop at Ukraine's border. It kept flying, and it came down inside NATO territory itself. If you want to understand exactly how that happened, minute by minute, and why an entire alliance built on the promise of collective defense still couldn't stop it in time, that's the story we covered in our last video. Russian missiles crossed into Poland's border. It's on your screen now, and it is genuinely one you don't want to miss. That's it for today. This is the Frontline Show. Thanks for watching.